No, I am not a city. That's my name. If you're enjoying the music that you're hearing, that's good, because I was the one that made it. Check out my music on SoundCloud, if you feel like it. Shameless plug over. Without further delay, I'm here at gunpoint to introduce this week's Benny Shakes Things Up. Without further ado, here's Benny.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Blue Glasses girl. Emma.
Welcome.
This is the second Zoom interview I've done, so it's not like when we're on StreamYard, we haven't got anyone commenting, but if anyone wants to comment on this podcast, please still do. We like them. It will be on Friday, so good evening.
Good evening.
Morning. So how are you?
Yes, I'm good. I'm not too bad. How's your week been, Benny?
Yeah, all right. Busy.
That's good.
On Zoom calls, and I've started interviewing non-disabled comedians.
Ooh, taking a risk then.
Yes, and getting them to be disabled for half an hour. So,
and let me guess, they didn't cope for that half hour very well.
They felt very silly, and I'm like, well, imagine how we felt.
Every day, all day long.
Yeah, so...
Well, I actually met somebody this week, and this has happened a few times actually over the last few months, who thinks they may, an adult, about older than me probably, who thinks she may have Erling syndrome, what I've got.
Yeah.
And she also thinks her daughter may have it.
Yeah.
And it was so exciting for me. This is one of the weird things about being disabled, which you'll understand.
Yeah.
Sharing my symptoms. You know, me going, do you bump into things? And her going, yes, I do. And do you drop things on your head out of cupboards? Yes, I do.
Well, that's what I mean. When people become disabled, they need a experienced disabled person to train them up.
Yeah. It's so true.
So if anyone has become disabled because of accidents or their condition, please get in contact. We do training. So
you call it training now, Benny? Wow, that's ambitious. Another thing I've been doing this week is I'm really getting into the world of TikTok. I love TikTok anyway, the form of entertainment. It's highly addictive. Yeah. I really get, what I do is I go through phases where I like watch it for like a couple of months and then I go off it a bit. Yeah. But I want to stay consistent this time. And I'm not a consistent poster. Yeah. But what I've noticed is it's so diverse on TikTok. That's why I love it. So I'm following a few disabled people.
Yes, I am.
Who are making comedy videos, but have never thought about doing stand-up. So I'm going to start reaching out to them, Benny, because they are so funny.
Yes, well, we want to keep busy over the next several months, so we will be doing a lot of pre-recorded podcasts and live. So yeah, invite them on.
Yeah, I will. So, I saw a guy this week who has the same condition as me, PTSD.
Right.
And he talks about his childhood trauma, but in a very dark way. Yeah. And he's very blunt about it. And it is hysterical.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we've got a
wonderful guest.
Yeah.
Can't wait to meet her, actually. I'm very excited about this.
She's called
Cherry.
Hard,
Hard man.
hard
Hard
man.
man. She's not a hard man, but she's called Cherry Hard Man.
So, yeah. So she will be joining us in a minute. So
How excited.
welcome, Sherry, to Benny Shakes Things Up. We did try and record, but Benny forgot, like usual. So, how are you doing? It's morning there, isn't it?
It is. It's 3:21 in the morning here,
Yeah.
but that's okay. I took a long nap, and I'm a night owl anyway. So
Right.
about the time I'm going to bed, my husband will be getting up, but that's okay.
So, go on.
I'm just going to say, by any chance, do you have a sleep disorder, Sherry, like a lot of us do?
Yes, I sleep with I have a CPAP machine. I have restless leg
Oh, you
syndrome.
have a CPAP, yeah.
Yeah, so it's always one or the other. I can't breathe or my legs won't stay still, one or the other. So
Sounds like fun times in your bedroom. That should definitely go into your set, Sherry.
yeah.
With being in America, do you have to pay for that to get maintained and things
My health insurance covers
right?
most of it. You know, sometimes I have to pay like a $15 copay or something, but
That's not bad.
yeah.
You work as well, don't you?
Yeah, I have a day.
What is your daytime job?
I work at a high school. I'm called a para-educator. I work with high school students
Right.
that need extra help in some of their classes. So
Fantastic. I love teenagers. They just keep you alive.
yeah.
Does any of that ever go into your comedy out of interest, Sherry? Do they ever inspire like
I do have a couple jokes about my job. I do. And then sometimes when the kids find out that I'm a comedian, they're like, tell us a joke. I'm like, I can't tell you guys. I'll say, once you're graduated, if you want to look me up, I don't even tell them my last name. They call me Miss Sherry because I don't want them to. I've only had 2 kids look me up and be able to find me online.
That's not bad considering the digital age we're in now. How you've gone that incognito, I don't know. Let's hope they don't find this podcast, hey?
They don't care enough about what I have to say. Don't want to look me up. So
so we've had Tanya Lee Davis on the show, and she's lived in America and in the UK, and she says America's got more adapted things for disabled people. Is that true where you are? I'm sorry for repeating the question.
no, it's okay. We can just pretend like that never happened. It kind of depends where you are. Like I live in the suburbs and I perform primarily in Tacoma, and we're good here. But if you go into Seattle proper, there's a lot more older buildings and buildings that have stairs. One of our comedy clubs, like there's the door, there's the stairs. And if you can't get up the stairs, you can't get in. Then there are a lot of places where you can get in, but you can't get on stage. So it's you're kind of never sure what you're getting if you get a job in Seattle.
Do they ever say, when I go, I say, I can do stairs as long as you help me. Would they help you if you're willing to struggle up the stairs?
Yeah, well, yeah, usually they ask, after I'm there, they ask if, what do you need? Can I help you? I bring my own stool that I put on stage. I bring it with me. But you know, like some places I've showed up and I just can't even get in the door, and then it's like, surprise! I guess I got to go home now. So
Yeah.
good luck finding somebody else. You know, I want them to think about the fact that they didn't even think about letting people know that there's stairs and that nobody
Yeah,
with wheels can get in.
I agree.
Yeah, I think like I mean, we said it earlier, but I think like one of the ways to make promoters think, and people generally, because it's so ingrained, that ableist attitude, that people are just not thinking of it. Like we've said, it's not that they're bad promoters or bad venues. You know, people are wanting to put on comedy, and we're comedians wanting to support that, and we're wanting opportunities to perform, and they're wanting to let us perform. But unfortunately, because it is so out of their realm of even thinking, there's so many other things they're thinking about to make that night successful. It's almost like, you know, accessibility is the afterthought, isn't it? Whereas we should be starting with the accessibility, really. We have, for example, here in the UK, we've got some disabled people that have set up an app called Access Rating, so you can rate entertainment venues and places. And it's just trying to get people to, you know, just to raise awareness really about the ableism. But I found the same as you, Sherry, the best way to do it is just to turn up, you know, and then be faced with the actual difficulty, because you live with a hidden disability, as far as I understand, the same as myself. And very much so here in the UK, it's very discriminatory. Basically, and we see it in our advertising, mainstream advertising, they'll depict a blind person with a cane or a person in a wheelchair, and basically if you don't look like those two stereotypes, you're not disabled. That is what I think most of the mainstream people in the UK would think.
Right.
Do you have some of the similar kind of mindsets in the US? You know, is there a certain like look to disabled people that defines you as disabled?
Well, I mean, this is kind of similar, because this has always been something I've had a pet peeve about. My son, my oldest son, has multiple physical and mental disabilities.
Right.
And so he has done Special Olympics ever since he was old enough to. And he's, you know, 36 now. And all the brochures and pictures and stuff, it's always a kid with Down syndrome. And that pisses me off so much that they just use the one disability that everybody can recognize. And it's like, they're not all disabilities are easily recognizable. Let's put a kid who looks quote unquote normal on the front. You know, do we need to really like argue about whether someone's disabled enough or whatever? You know, I just, that bothers me.
Yeah, because we have now, since we've had the Paralympics here, we've got 4, I know it's not a lot, 4 adverts. I think one's for Dove soap and Dove cream, and one lady is blind, but you can't see she's blind, and one is for a woman who hasn't got a hand, so it's her arms in her pocket. And the other one is the Malteser advert, and they're sign languaging.
Yeah, I love that advert.
Everyone's got to read the subtitles. And I think we are on the right track, but we should have been there 10 years ago. We should be more adapted by now. Do you agree?
I do agree. And first of all, let's just say Dove has been killing it in the plus size department too, and the body positive movement. So I think we all need to buy some Dove soap. But
other soaps are available.
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was. Do I agree that that we've come? Yeah. Well, now see, I remember when I was a kid, there were no students with disabilities in school at all. They were all hidden somewhere. So if I look at it that way, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
This is what we were saying about segregation, isn't it? So going back to the comedy, in terms of the accessibility, if people are ableist in their attitudes, and I use my platform to try and raise awareness about ableism, because people don't know they're ableist, until they're faced with it.
Right.
They think they're decent people who want to, treat everybody equally. But like when they're faced with that access problem, and so the thing is obviously is that now we've got platforms, we've got digital platforms like what we're on now, we've got social media, haven't we? And like I'm a bit of a fan of TikTok at the minute. I've got to go through phases with it. And like one thing I've noticed on there is it's really diverse. So there's lots of disabled people going on there. There's lots of plus size women going on there, and people of all body types. And there's people with colostomy bags, all sorts really. And it's just great seeing a diversity of bodies, that they don't all look so stereotyped. But unfortunately, we've got a long way to go, I think, from what Benny was saying, because I still feel like disabled people, hidden disabilities, or visible, are still a minority. The fact that we can't access a venue to perform, that tells us that disabled people are not accessing it to actually come and see it. And that's what worries me, because it's like already we're saying, oh, we don't expect disabled people to attend. We've not even thought about that. We don't expect you to come and socialise and go to theatre and go to live performances and get drunk. So already we're creating mental stereotypes of what a disabled person's like. And I think it goes back to what you were saying about your son. So my son, he's not visibly disabled either. He's 6 foot, strapping, handsome lad. He looks fine. Do you know what I mean? But he is disabled. And so it's how do we shift those stereotypes? And I think some of it is like these discussions today, and just ordinary disabled folk coming online and be like, hey, this is what a disabled person looks like. So I'm just wondering, like, have you used your, digital platform since the pandemic hit, or have you ever talked about disability in your set?
I do talk about my disability a little in my set, but mostly in person. Like, I don't think I've really, like, I maybe have 1 or 2 jokes that I've thrown out, but I guess I've kind of been passing. Like we talked about this earlier, I think I've kind of been passing, not necessarily on purpose, but on a Zoom show, you can tell I'm fat, but that's all you can really tell. You can't see that I scooted my chair over instead of walked in the room, So I don't know, maybe that is a good goal to start mentioning that more often. It's like I do some open mics, and I think of one comedian in particular that she's in a chair, and that's a lot of what not a lot of her act, but I mean, it's and so now she has to tell everybody, and she says something like, I never thought I'd see the day when I get tired of having to explain to people that I'm in a chair,
Yeah.
And that's the fine balance, isn't it, between explaining and it being a joke. And I mean, one of the things that Benny's podcast is doing with like Benny Shaking It Up is trying to provide that platform for comedians where it's maybe not as noticeable. Like with Benny, we can tell, Benny, you've got a disability. I don't know what it is that gives it away, Benny.
Hang on, I'll stop moving.
Don't stop moving. You look so boring when you stop moving.
It hurts.
But like we've said, for Sherry and I, we can relate. Like when we're doing Zoom gigs, like you can only see us from here up. So yeah, you might be able to tell we're a plus size girl, but other than that, like what information visually are you getting about our disabilities? And if it's a hidden disability, like we've said about our sons, where we're not able to see what their disability might be, or their medical condition, like we talked about, say somebody with a colostomy bag, you're not going to be able to see that, or Crohn's syndrome, or there's a whole host of things, isn't it? You're talking about autoimmune disorders. And the thing is, going back to like percentages, I think it's something ridiculous, like only 7% of all disabled people are actually wheelchair users, so like the other 93%, what do they look like? So I think it's really important we use these online platforms, even if we're not coming in shouting about it, like you're saying, hey, I've got a disability, but just actually just being amongst a set with able-bodied comedians and saying, hey, I'm here representing the disabled, contingency, as it were.
Well, that's why I've got this podcast to promote comedians, and we are now promoting artists, or if any disabled person has got a story, they're more than welcome to come on. So, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I was thinking about this because it's really telling about myself primarily, but also about society. So I just started using the scooter maybe, I don't know, a year or two ago, and I've been doing comedy for 5 years.
Right.
So for the first 3 years, I was faking it a lot by like walking a little bit, sitting down, and then being able to walk a little bit more, sit down again, and kind of trying to, I don't want to say try to hide it, but yeah, kind of to try to hide the fact that I was having difficulty, because so much of my persona on stage is strong, powerful, independent, sexual woman. And I felt like that if they saw me in the scooter or not being able to walk, that would take away some of my power. And I really struggled till it just finally physically, I had to start using the scooter all the time. And what freedom that has given me, though. And it's just, I feel like sad for myself that I had to go through that struggle. And I don't think that's probably that unusual.
I think that'd be really common. And I think there's a lot of people, we were talking, Benny and I, before you came on, Sherry, about what it'd be like to acquire a disability, which a big percentage of people with disabilities have acquired them. And don't forget, as we're moving to older age, we lose our mobility anyway. Yeah. So the majority of the population become disabled, which is why we fight for disability rights. But I think there's a lot of people that are scared. Same, I'm a strong, powerful, sexy, independent woman. And my concern is I don't want my disability to define me. But equally, I'm not going to shy away from the fact that I am also within that strong, independent. I'm also a strong, disabled, independent, sexy woman. And it's great that there's platforms now, like the social media, like the Instagrams, like the TikToks and the Zooms of the world, where we can be all of that. We don't have to kind of pick and choose. I think like sometimes people think it is a kind of, if I'm strong and I'm independent and I'm a plus size woman, I've then got to drop the disability. It's almost like we tick too many boxes, you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, no.
And it is that question, isn't it? Like, is it okay to tick all the boxes, because, and is it because we're fearful that we lose something, or is it because we're fearful that we're going to be judged, and how we're going to be perceived by that external, society, isn't it? But I find that really interesting, that journey that you've gone on. And actually what I think is really positive for people to hear that might acquire a disability is that, one, that's normal and that most people go through those emotions, but actually the liberation. I have a friend with a scooter, and I remember it took her a while to get her scooter because of similar feelings. And then it was so liberating for her, like the freedom that it gave me getting my glasses.
Places, yeah.
I couldn't hardly see before getting my glasses 3 years ago. And it was like I would bump into things. I couldn't go on escalators. I couldn't get up and down stairs. And they are classified as a mobility aid. And people just think I'm wearing Elton John's glasses, whatever. But the fact is, I can't physically get around with them. Like I was saying to you earlier, I was using a stick before that. So, and that was, that was a kind of, that took a lot of my power away. That was like, oh, a young woman, walking around with a stick, what we're used to seeing like a 70-year-old with, to get about. I got a lot of funny looks and people like pushing my stick away, like trying, test me out, see if I was really disabled. And I find there's a lot of that happens, Ben, isn't there? Like testing people to see if they're really disabled.
I get that all the time. If I'm in the scooter, it's like, do you really need that scooter? Do you really need that stick? Well, hello. can't you see my disability? And sometimes I won't go out the house because it's that depressing that
Mm.
I don't want to see people. Uh, it's ruined my relationship with women or partners. I won't date no more because I don't want to put myself through that hardship. I just can't do it.
Mm.
And this throws up the question then, doesn't it, Bennett? Is it, this is what I always say to people, it's like, my disability is not my problem. It's people's attitudes towards it that is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
You know,
we've had a quote from Mark Buckwood. I don't know if you agree, Sherry, that we shouldn't adapt. The world around us should.
Mm. Hmm.
And it's not our
is it about adapting though, or is it about, I'm not sure about that, because I don't like the thought of everybody in the world having to adapt around a minority. Do you know what I mean? Because every minority, whether you say in the gay community, trans LGBTQI community, whether you're a minority because of your race or ethnicity or a religious belief or something like that, it's like saying we all have to conform to it. I'm not sure about that. And I even sometimes, if I'm honest, struggle with equality because I'm somebody for fairness. And sometimes equality does not equal fairness.
Mm.
You know, you could have a venue that's meeting all the equality acts and still it might not be suitable. Like the lights might be too bright for me, but they haven't considered somebody with Erlings. Do you see what I mean? But it's got great wheelchair access. So I struggle with that idea a little bit. But how about we're just kind, compassionate, accommodating, accepting? Do you know what I mean? Like, I would just start, I don't know where you're at, Sherry, but right now for me, I would just start with acceptance. People just accepting that ableism actually does exist. It's not their fault. It's just something that's happened over a period of time. Just like we're accepting slavery existed, racism existed. You know, it's not anybody's fault, but it is ingrained. It has happened. It is an ingrained attitude. And it's not a healthy one. It's a toxic one and it needs kind of wiping out.
Yeah, well, you know what I've always said, well, I haven't always said this. Well, it started when my son, he wasn't always in a wheelchair. And so the year that he got in a wheelchair, he had an aneurysm burst in his brain. And it was my first experience having to push someone around in a wheelchair. And until that day, I didn't realize a lot of things because I'd never had to deal with it. And it's like curb cuts. I don't know if that's what you call them over there. You know, like to get like people parking in front of curb cuts all the time.
Constantly.
And I'm on the sidewalk and then I can't get off the sidewalk. You know, that kind of stuff is so frustrating. But it's like, I think that everyone, like maybe in school, they should teach that in a class, like let's push, you know, take turns pushing each other in a wheelchair and just see what the world is like. I mean, wheelchairs are not everything, but just experience different or learn about different disabilities and what it's like to live with one.
Yeah, well, it comes on to mind what I've been working on these past months, and I tried an experiment with a able-bodied comedian last week. I got him, I won't spoil it because it will be on YouTube. I got him to wear oven gloves to open a sweet just so he could feel my shakiness. If that makes sense. What would you get someone to do if you could get them to experience your life, your disability?
Yeah, I would just put them in a wheelchair or a scooter.
Yeah, and see
And
how,
then make them go places like go to public bathrooms, you
yeah,
know, where there's always some skinny little 21-year-old girl changing her clothes in the one wheelchair stall, you know,
really.
just that kind of
And
stuff.
don't you have this accessible?
Yeah, she's saying, Benny, that the accessible cubicle is being used by somebody trying on some clothes.
All right, because we have to have a key for that.
Oh,
No,
Yeah, we have a key system now, Sherry, and you have to buy your own key and carry your own key around with you.
Yeah.
So therefore, if you're like me, who's obviously you've got an autoimmune deficiency, you get brain fog, you forget your key, I can't use the toilet,
oh,
and then you have
yeah,
to
I
find
don't
somebody
like
to
that
ask.
idea.
And then
I
you have
don't
to
like
ask
that.
somebody, which is so embarrassing. It's so humiliating. You have to ask somebody, like, have they, if there's somebody in the building facilities, have they got a key? And 9 times out of 10, you can't find them, or they don't have a key then. And it's even worse because some of them have even got the audacity to ask you if you need to be using it. It's crazy.
stupid.
Yeah, it's all those little things that can really.
And it's your everyday life stuff, isn't it, Sherry? That's
Oh,
what.
yeah.
That's what's so shocking. It's like it's everyday stuff, like you say, crossing the road, going to the toilet, going to getting in and out of a building. I think people forget that it's your everyday living. I think there's a big assumption that disabled people live every day, but we don't quite know how they do it, but they just do it, so it's fine.
Right. But I mean, that's why a lot of disabled people stay home
Yeah,
because it's too hard to navigate the world. And
But then are we going back to what we said about then it does feed into that ableist attitude that we're not expected to go out.
right.
And we are expected to stay in then and not be seen. Do you see what I mean? And not cause the fuss. Because I feel like, say what we said about the promoters and just turning up, even after that happens, a lot doesn't change. And I think that's because you're just the one. Like I've become known, like now in the areas, oh, it's that disabled one, that one that always kicks up the fuss, it's her again,
Right. But,
and do you want to get labeled like that?
Sometimes you just want to go have a nice meal or
yeah,
a drink with your friends, and you don't really want to be an activist right now,
Yeah.
So there's both sides there.
And you don't ever like set out to be the activist, though. That's the crazy thing. You might go to that restaurant, and just because of how it's set out, you might just end up like that. It might be just like literally like, well, I can't get in or I can't get to the toilet.
Right.
You might be midway through your meal, you didn't even know, and it's just the way that they stop and sort of look at you as if to say, really? We thought you were passing as the able-bodied person today.
Oh boy, there's a lot of work to be done.
there is.
There
Because
is.
you sometimes feel like there was a show, I used to love it on the US called Faking It, right? It was great, where people used to like pretend to fake to be in different occupations, like be a hairdresser when they weren't. And it's a bit like that with disability. Like you say, if I don't want to be the activist, I mean, I don't think I ever switch it off. It's just part of me. But if I'm going into a place and obviously they don't know, and I don't know how they're going to treat me, and then something happens, like we say, like something really simple, like the lights just in my face or something, and ask if I can be reseated, and you're seen as that one. We have very much, I don't know if it's quite the same actually in the US, I'd be interested to know, Show, but in the UK we have this massive complaint culture. People love to complain and moan and groan about everything, even things out of their control, like the weather. We love complaining about the weather. So because of that, I feel as a disabled woman, I get a lot more grief because it's like they actually think I'm complaining when I'm not. I'm asking for a reasonable adjustment. I'm asking for a change so that I'm comfortable. Like it's almost as like if somebody shat themselves, you wouldn't say, just sit there in your own shit and enjoy your meal, you'll be fine. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
But because I've said, look, I'm really uncomfortable, I need to move, it's like, oh, she's a complainer. And it's like, how do we separate out complaining from just making a reasonable adjustment and just understanding that actually and accepting that we do have those needs and they are real,
Yeah. Well, as people get older, they start to understand better,
Yeah.
unfortunately, because something happens to them or someone they love and then they get it. But it would be nice if people just innately got it. And it'll get that way eventually. But I do think we need to be more visible for sure.
Yeah.
I think the education, and this is part of it, Benny's podcast, isn't it? But going back to what you were saying about children in schools, and you work in education, and I'm a background working with children and families as well. But thinking about it, like, I think sometimes, why am I so bothered about this? Why am I an activist? Yes, I'm disabled, but why am I so bothered? And I think to a degree, every disabled person is an activist, because we're always fighting for something that's not there, if you see what I mean, that we don't have. But one of my earliest memories, I would have been about 4 years old, was helping my uncle, who was paraplegic. He broke his neck at age 21 in a swimming accident. And I was helping empty his colostomy bag while he was in his wheelchair. And I remember it so vividly. And it's like, that has obviously shaped my experience of the world. And so a lot of it, like you say, unfortunately, people's attitudes don't change until it's a close one, until it's a loved one, until they've physically experienced it. So maybe you're onto something there, Sherry. Maybe people just need, like what Benny's doing, more real life experiences of being in our shoes to get that true empathy.
Right.
Just remind us, Sherry, because I think you've told us one of your disabilities, but you haven't told us your physical disability.
Well, I've got an autoimmune disorder and mobility. Yeah, the knees are, and like, my knees are it's actually really just arthritis, but it's gotten so bad they won't operate on me because of my size.
Right. Okay.
And so at this point, my knees are now rotating sideways.
Oh dear.
So I was like, well, what in the heck's are they just gonna let them snap off? I don't know. Who knows how I'm gonna end up, but it's not getting any better.
This is another thing, Sherry. You've just sort of made me think there, saying this about, the link between obesity and not treating them. We've very much got that culture here in the UK. I'm classed as an obese woman. And like, I was watching a girl on TikTok yesterday who had an ear infection, and a GP said it was because of her weight. That's how ridiculous it is in the UK. It's like, it doesn't matter what my ailment is, it's because I'm obese. Now, they will do the same here. They may not treat you or may not operate until you lose some of the weight. But again, going back to what Benny was saying earlier about people saying, are you sure you need your scooter to get out? This is where I think a lot of the problem lies, is that because especially here in the UK, we've got a free healthcare service. They don't believe we're disabled because everything's fixable in this fantasy world. Disability shouldn't exist. You know what I mean? Like, your knees should be fixed. My brain should be fixed. Benny's shake should be fixed. So there's a lot of this, well, it must be fake because surely we could just fix it. And it's not until somebody's had an accident, had an injury, gained weight through whatever reasons, or have an autoimmune deficiency, which contributes to gaining weight, as we know, or are in that situation, they then start to think, oh, so it could be me. It's not fixable. And it's just a fantasy, isn't it? Not everything is fixable. Disability can't be fixed away by healthcare all the time.
Right. Well, yeah.
Crazy. I did have a question, but forgot now.
I know. I forgot what I was going to say too. So
I'd like to hear about the what you were saying earlier, Benny, about the president. I'd like to go back to that. That was really interesting.
Yeah. How did you feel about the president and what happened this week?
Well, our United States it's been craziness for 4 years now. And unfortunately, I think it's going to get a little bit worse before it gets any better, because the Trump supporters are really heated up right now. And, I think they're going to impeach him this week. And I think that's what they need to do, is just do that so that he can get out of here and never come back. But I've got family members who are Trump supporters,
Mm.
and you can unfollow people on Facebook. Like I don't want to like close blood relatives. I don't want to like block them, but there's no way I can speak to them right now.
No.
There's just no way I couldn't. So it's really divided the country for sure. And it's like civil war I don't know. I mean, it might come to that.
I hope not, but we did a live podcast last night, and we had Shuri. I'm sorry, I forgot your name again. But she was saying, what was she saying? That he shouldn't have got in for what he said about that disabled reporter.
Mhm.
In the right to say on TV,
Right.
what gives him the right for taking the mick out of disabled people?
Yeah, that's
Mhm.
our job.
It's wrong.
We're going to take the mick out of ourselves.
I mean, I've got a friend who does impressions, and I said to Ian, do one of me, it'd be funny. And he said point blank, I'm sorry, Ben, it would be wrong. But I said, Ian, you're disabled. It's okay. I'm giving you permission. And he said, no, I won't do it. So how did that make you feel when you heard him do all that?
Oh, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
Mm.
He's got the mentality of a third grade boy.
Yeah.
He does. It's just like a dumb third grade boy that hasn't been raised very well by his parents. It's just that, and then grabbing women by the pussy. I mean, he doesn't have respect for anyone. So how he's gotten where he's gotten, I don't even know how that happened.
I still reckon, and I don't care if I get in trouble, but I still reckon there's a bit of Hitler in him.
There's a bit what?
Bit of Hitler in him.
Yeah. Oh,
He's
for sure.
just got Hitler. I mean,
Mhm.
why did they give him the codes to the bombs?
I know.
God.
Hopefully
Surely
we're
he must have had a psychoanalyze before he got into the presidency.
well, and what I don't understand too is that, like, with all I can make, we could all make lists and lists and lists of stuff that he's done, but it's not until the lawmakers there in the Capitol realize, oh, this is going to endanger us. Now they're all up in arms.
Yeah.
Oh, but they've been kissing his ass for 4 years.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
didn't care about the rest of us.
Yeah,
So-
exactly.
That kind of is infuriating too,
It's kind of the same here. I would say our political system is pretty much the same. We don't really care what happens to the plebs, but the minute it starts to affect the government, and if somebody went and tried to bomb our government, then there'd be an issue,
Mhm.
But us plebs are kind of unimportant. I'm curious, Sherry, how you think it's going to affect comedy though, because like you say, civil war, who knows? Let's hope not, but it's it seems very close to that, doesn't it? And the divisions that it's creating, like we've got divisions here in the UK, like we will have people who support Labour joking about Tories, but we have a commonality where we can all come together and we can all complain about our Prime Minister, because one thing that our Prime Minister Boris has said only recently because of the pandemic was that everybody who works in the creative arts, so I like to do a little bit of acting, I like to do writing. I like to also do a bit of comedy performing. Anybody who, you know, got friends who are dancers, singers, all types of different performers, anybody doing anything like that is not required. And we all need to retrain into retraining in digital, into the digital world, and be doing digital jobs. So, I mean, I just was curious, like you've been doing comedy for about, you say 5 years now. Like, what's your perception of the arts and how much it is needed, especially like in times like now where there's a lot of turmoil?
Well, I think people need comedy right now, but comedy's weird right now because it's on Zoom and stuff. So people are getting their comedy on Netflix and YouTube and stuff like that. And so, well, I mean, and this is interesting because like when the pandemic, everything first started, it was like, I did a few Zoom shows and it was like, no, I'm not going to do this. They're not laughing. And I know that this, you know, I just killed a room with this bit and they're not laughing. I'm not going to do this. And so for a few months I didn't, but then I started thinking about it and I was like, you know, if people that are doing Zoom or doing content wherever it is, if it's on TikTok or YouTube or whatever, they're getting farther ahead than the people that have just said, I'm not going to do this till live comedy comes back. So why don't I learn some new skills and hone them to get, and so am I working on my regular act? Not so much, but I am finding different ways to do different things because, I mean, that's where it's going to go anyway. You know, we've all gotten used to this.
Well, we've been thrust into this digital world, you know, without any warning. A pandemic's hit. Like I said, I didn't even know what Zoom was, and I'd never used it in business. I wasn't working. A lot of disabled people, I know you've got a regular job, but a lot of disabled people don't have regular jobs, or they do a bit of voluntary work or freelance like Benny and I do. So the fact is that we were suddenly thrust into this digital world. It's like the TikToks, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, the Zooms, and the StreamYards, and it's like we're going live, and you know, and more importantly, going global, Sherry, because one of the things I've loved about it is I've done a bit of improv, done a bit of comedy gigs, is having people from all over the world performing alongside me, which has been so exciting because I love that. I love being part of that global culture. So there is some advantages, but the disadvantages, like you say, it's very different, isn't it? And so it's like, do we do straight stand-up comedy is the question now, isn't it? Or do we do skits, or do we do improv, or do we have to adapt, you know, because we're in this digital comedy sphere now?
I found that like comedy game shows work really well on Zoom. I'm going to let my dog out. He's like scratching at the door. But like straight stand up, you have to have just the right, come on, Debbie.
Oh, so cute.
Yeah.
This is why your show's called Heavy Petting, isn't it? Because you talk about people and the pets, isn't it, Sharon?
Yeah.
I like this. I like the fact that you incorporate pets and sex. It's good.
I know. And
be careful where you go with that, Benny.
Yeah, I'm shaking up, but don't
shake that one up.
Yeah, I know.
Sex. Hang on a minute, people. Just for clarity.
Yeah, we do. There's a clear line from.
Clear line, everybody.
Yeah.
There's a clear line. It's not together.
It's not a Benny line. It's not a shaky line.
But you know what's funny? What's funny is that I was probably on about episode 13 or something before I had a guest that was like, didn't know that heavy petting was a euphemism for, you know, making out or sexual contact of it. And they're like, when they found that out. So then I realized, I have to explain this every time because young people have not heard that before. So
yeah, it's kind of an older term. Like here in the UK, we're familiar with it because when we used to go swimming as kids at like our municipals, like our free swimming pools, there's like a poster saying no heavy petting on the side. But
wow, really?
Yeah, but he's still, I think, about now. Even now, they might have changed the wording of it. But obviously, like, what kid ever reads that? You know, like,
Right.
but it's the kind of thing like kids would read and go, "What does that mean, Mummy? What's heavy petting?" And you're like, "Thank you. I'm not wanting to get into this today. I've just gone for a swim lesson." So, but it is kind of like you say, a bit of an older term. I mean, the good thing about the digital stuff now is we can actually like write disclaimers on the bottom, or we can put them at the start of the show and then kind of move on a little bit, which I think is quite helpful. So we're not having to constantly like explain something. And like for some of the gigs that we've done, like one of the nights is especially set up. It's called Laugh Able. So it's for people who are not able-bodied. And so it's kind of in the title, and the host explains what it is. But then we just come on and perform. We don't have to be going, "Hey, we're disabled." You know, it's like
right.
already set up. So I think there just needs to be more where somebody else has done the groundwork and the hosts are doing the work, and we can just come in and perform.
We have that. We have a guy here in Seattle that does a thing called the Disabled List. And so everyone has this on the show has a disability, and so those are really nice, and that gives you a more supportive audience, because you usually have people with disabilities and their family members like to come to those shows, so you got a built-in cushion there, you know.
It's more inclusive and more. I mean, I find the audiences for these kind of shows like so much more fun. I know I shouldn't really be saying that because that sounds awful in a way. That sounds discriminatory, but they are more inclusive.
We are all together, and we've got our own community.
Well, and I think that does make for I don't want to say a better show, but for just a better feeling. Like I've been on mom shows where it's all moms, and the vibe is always really good. I think when you've got a little community that's all pulling together to do something.
So there's something about identity, isn't there? People coming together and over an identity. And so I think that's what makes it harder when you're the one disabled stand-up act, whether it's digital or in real person, going in. You feel like you're going into this very ableist world. And and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about being that minority, being that complainer, being the one. You know, like, why should we change something for that one? But like, how do we get like able bodies to come into our world a bit? Do you know what I mean? Like, come to our gigs.
Right. Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? And say, this is what it's like. You see, do you feel a bit like a fish out of water? Well, this is what it's like the other way around, you know? And it's going back to what we were saying earlier about kind of putting people in those experiences, isn't it?
What I'm trying to do. Also, Sherry, I want to know, you're a female comedian and disabled. You've been in comedy for 5 years. Have you ever had males or females, or you know of other females getting mentally and physically abused in comedy because they're female and it's a male world? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I don't know if I really want to, if I really can speak to getting abused, but there's definitely a good old boys mentality in comedy that, you know, it's like in our scene, there's like these certain people that just get booked all over again everywhere. And they, you know, every now and then, you know, there's usually 4 guys and 1 female on the show.
Yeah.
And it's usually the same female, and it's usually the skinniest, prettiest one. And that's irritating. It's like, even today I was on a group chat with some guys I'm doing a show with, and they're all like joking back and forth, and then I interject a comment and then dead silence, you know. It's just that always feeling out of the loop, or not like I'm not cool enough to hang out with them, that kind of thing. And who knows how much of that is just my inside my head, you know.
I don't think it is, Sherry. I think as well, I'm curious, do you feel it's hard because obviously you're plus size I'm plus size, so we can't go. I mean, obviously, I've not always been plus size. I don't know what your situation is, but we can't go, oh, I wonder what their reactions would be like if we weren't. But there's a culture around plus size. I don't know if you've experienced this, that strong, independent, sexy plus size women are not very much accepted, you know. So there's another culture there, isn't there? So not only have we got the boys' club culture, but then we've got what's seen as sexually attractive. So, you know, we can't use the I'm sexy card according to them. So if we interject in the conversation, I feel that rebuff, that little cold shoulder, that little silence is a bit like, you know.
But I get that from the other comedians, but not from audiences at all.
Absolutely.
Audiences love me. They love to touch me.
Yes.
They want to hug me. They want their pictures taken with me. And the male comedians will say stuff like, I want a big contest. It was like there was 150 comedians in it. It ran over like a 2 or 3 month period. And it was at the biggest comedy club in that area. And one of the judges said something like, well, I think so-and-so is going to win, but you never know. Sherry brought a bunch of people. And I didn't, you know, or they always say, oh, Sherry's probably going to win because there's a lot of women in the audience. It's like,
that's wrong.
They're just people. Yeah. Women are people. Like,
well, the thing is, there's this whole culture. We've had there's t-shirts, people making t-shirts and tote bags and things over here saying fat women can be funny. It's a long-standing prejudice, isn't it? That can fat women be funny? We've got a great British culture of, you know, of brilliant comedians who are fat, you know what I mean? And just, you know, Joe Brand, I mean, there's just, you know, loads of people I can't think of on the top of my head now, but there's still this ingrained thing. But yeah, it's an obvious sexism, because how many fat male comedians are there? You know, it's common and it's fine, isn't it? And they're accepted.
Right. But it's like, okay, well, you guys just don't like me all you want. I'll just eat up all the love after the show from the audience.
Totally.
And when they're all laughing at me way more than you, then you can just go home and be mad about it, you know? So whatever.
Do you agree in competitions for comedians? Because I do like them, and then I don't like them, because why should I perform to get a paid spot when I know I'm good at my job? What's your opinion?
Well, I think a lot of venues do comedy competitions because it's a good way to have shows where you don't have to pay anybody except whoever wins, first of all. I like comedy competitions when I win, and I don't like them when I don't. I mean,
I agree.
So for someone who wins kind of a lot of them, I'm going to say I like them. But I know there have been times when, like, I knew somebody won just because they brought a bunch of people, or I felt, I'm a dirty comedian, so I get a lot of she's too dirty and a lot of like trying to shame me, slut shame me or whatever. And so a lot of times that kind of always makes me feel like I'm, you know, the girl from the wrong side of the tracks. And, you know, so I don't know. A lot of times when things don't go well for me, I feel a lot of that.
You see, that's another thing, isn't it, Sherry, that you said she's too, you know what I mean? Again, so our sex is coming into it, being a woman, isn't it? Why can a woman not do that kind of humor?
Right.
You know, what men can do any kind of humor. They can be out there. It can be as dark as you like. It can be as sexual as you like. Totally accepted and actually expected to a degree. But a woman, oh no. So why are we getting the slut shaming? You know, men are studs and women are sluts. Where is, you know, this culture, like how it's so interesting to me that like the discrimination that happens out in culture and these cultural biases are coming into comedy. whether it be political, whether it be about sex or gender. I just find it so fascinating that you can see them embedded in the cultural comedy so vividly.
For sure. And, you know, going back to the politics thing, I think it's going to really, like any comedian performing right now, and we do have some comedy clubs in the United States open in different states. Probably not a good idea to do political humor.
Yeah.
Unless you want to lose half your audience at this point, you know.
Yeah.
And this is where maybe, you know, people like ourselves can really come into something. Like I'm not really interested in politics. I'll never talk about that subject. But for humour, this is where we need to diversify a little bit, isn't it? And people, like one of the things you said about audiences loving you, Sherry, is probably the same reason I get good feedback from audience, because I just talk about my life, my personal stories, and nobody can really argue with that. But I'm curious if you've experienced this. We've talked about, you know, could it possibly be sexism because you're a woman? But I've also noticed like a lot of people are a negative because of my confidence, because I'm actually talking about my life, and I am talking about, say, about my disability or about my sex life or whatever I want to speak about. And if I speak about those things, it's almost like they're like, hang on a minute, she's taking that risk, she's putting herself out there. And I think that can be quite intimidating for some other people who are trying to write comedy material and come up with new material, and maybe are not willing to sort of take that risk, put themselves out there, really talk about who they are.
Well, I do see a lot. I can think of one person in particular that in all the years I've known him, never heard him do one joke that's personally about himself. They're always
I see a lot of that
jokey jokes, you know.
Yeah. I see a lot of that kind of avoiding people talking like, oh, when I think about the British comedians that I love, I don't know about you, Benny, but in the UK, and I do like observational comedy, so I'm maybe a bit biased, but thinking about Lee Evans, thinking about other like British comedians that I love, when I think about those, the common denominator is they talk about their lives. You know, like Sarah Millican, she's like a plus size lady. She talks about sex with her husband, what she eats for dinner, you know. Victoria Wood, you know, we just want to hear about Rosie Jones. And Rosie Jones she's a great person, because not only is she disabled, but obviously she's a lesbian as well. So she ticks all the diversity boxes, and she jokes about that. She actually uses that in a set. You know, she'll say that as part of. And I love people that like self-demonstrative like that. You know, they're joking about what we already know to be true and stating the obvious. And I've seen that audiences love that. People love that. We like people who joke about themselves. So if a comedian's taking the humor outside of themselves, I kind of just think, what's missing? You know, how come you're having to fabricate this? You know, just talk about you. So to me, it shows a lack of confidence. And I don't know if that's then something we get projected onto us then, you know, that actually, you know, we're the fat disabled ones, so we should be the ones lacking confidence. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, well, that sounds like guys I used to date when I was dumb and 21 too. But, but you know, one thing that is a common experience for me, and I don't know if this happens to you, I very often, almost after every show, especially at the comedy clubs, the big ones, have women come up to me after the show and say, I just want you to know you're such an inspiration. You don't even know. Like, I feel so inspired by you right now. And like, you know, my act is not particularly inspirational. I'm just up there being myself. But just the fact that I'm up there being myself.
It's the fact you're up there, Sherry. I've had the same thing. And, you know, and I used to think the same, like, what am I doing? But you know what it is? And it'd be the same for Benny or anybody else. It's the fact we're actually getting up there. Stand up, public speaking is the number one fear for all humans. And the fact that we're just willing to, that's what I'm saying about being vulnerable and people seeing us on stage. But you have gone that next step. If you're then not only vulnerable, but are then talking about yourself as well. It's like a double vulnerability.
Do you like the word I can't even say it, inspirational. Do you like the word? Because I don't. When people say that to me, I'm like, no, I'm not. Just no, I'm
Well,
disabled and I'm living my life. That's all I'm doing.
I can see how that would be irritating, but when they say it to me, I don't necessarily think it's because I'm disabled.
Right.
I usually think it's because I'm a woman and I'm fat and I get up there and talk about sex and sexuality,
Yeah.
like big girls get laid too, you know.
I think there's two kind of ways, like what Benny said about the inspiration. There's two levels to it for me. There's one which is the one like Sherry's talking about, where you've got somebody coming up to you, you can feel that real human connection where they're like, thank you, like there's hope for me. You know, if you can get up on a stage and do that, maybe I can do one of my goals. But then there's that once removed thing, which you see a lot in society of people who are able-bodied going, oh wow, look at that video of that disabled person or that fat woman, that's so inspiring. You know, that's a completely different
it's probably a lot like when they tell a fat woman that's wearing a bathing suit that she's brave.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah,
it's like, no, I'm going swimming.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, we've come to nearly the end of the show, and I must ask you two more questions because Kate's question is, what is your favourite biscuit or cookie? Because you're American, we're allowing cookie.
Thank you.
Biscuit. So, what is your favorite?
Well, I like chocolate chip cookies, but if I'm just going into the store, it's Oreos.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's true. That's
it's an Oreo girl like me, Benny.
I will let Kate know so she can put it on the board. And a new question I've come up with for the end of the show is, if you was president, what would you change in your country? One thing, what would you change as a disabled person? I know there's
so many things. Free healthcare for everybody. That would be the main number one.
Yeah, you're the second one to say that. So I agree. I think everywhere should have ramps and no stairs.
True, that too.
Yeah. Yeah, well, thank you for coming on the show. Don't go.
It's been really fun, you guys. Really.
I'm just ending the show. So, if anyone wants to donate £1 or £5 to, I forgot your name again. Sorry.
Sherry Hardman.
Sherry Hardman. Sorry, I can't read. And cerebral palsy, right?
There's an excuse for everything, Sherry. This cerebral palsy, like, you know.
Well, it works.
It's working for you, Benny.
Yeah, if you want to donate, there will be a link in the description to donate either £1 or £5 for a coffee or a cup of tea. So yeah, and I will leave Sherry's links to her podcast and her website. So we will see you on the next episode. So goodbye, everyone.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid that's all we have time for tonight from Benny and the gang. Please remember to subscribe and click on the bell for more notifications on the next installment of Benny Shakes Things Up. If you want to support the podcast or you like the jingle from Leicester in Nottingham, please click on the links below. Adios, amigos.